Welcome to John Birch Society Part 2, folks. This is a special report. My name is TruePowerIsMine, your host. Today, let's just go in hard. Let's start off with this ass clown and keep it moving.
Why I went with old Voice of America transmitters that got bought out by private groups when the U.S. stopped transmitting at hundreds of thousands of watts of shortwave into Europe and Africa and everywhere. They said, there's no money in that. Why are you going to pay $10,000 a month to be on 4 or 5 different transmitters, 10 hours a day, blasting all over the world? You know, we've got a lot of folks work here at the office that were in the military, and some of them were, involved in not just your standard special operations stuff, but some of the most elite groups out there. And my parents had friends that were in the John Birch Society, guys that worked at the telephone company, FBI agents, cops, lawyers that would come by the house, and they basically have John Birch meetings.
Now that isn't that interesting. That sheds a lot of light on Mr. Jones, okay? I just wanted to draw this out, all right, with the information from the last video. Let's go to the John Birch Society's own website and hear what the hell that they have to say. Yes, we'll see.
Well, welcome back again this week. This week we're going to talk about the Illuminati into Nazism. Now, Nazism is a form of fascism, a variation of socialism. Both of the primary movements known as fascism, Italian fascism and German Nazism, have their roots in communism.
Okay, bam. That is his bread and butter. Communist, everybody's communist. Have you ever wondered why a lot of American industrial entities hates communism? Do you think it's, has anything to do with the communists back during the Great Depression days actually, forming unions, messing with their money, their bottom line? Could that possibly be it? We're going to delve into that a little bit later on this video.
Modern histories tend to erase the early history of the fascist leaders that show connections to the communist movement. We know that the early communists called themselves social democrats. In fact, the use of the term communism came into use because the word socialist became unpopular. So a new term was used after the revolutions of 1848, communism, based off the circulation of the Communist Manifesto. Fascism is simply a variation of socialism, which has been designed to work in a country where communism would not work to gain the control of the people. The people won't accept it. In other words, they won't accept communism, but they'll accept some variation. The conspiracy uses whatever...
Now, isn't that America right now? They're willing, a lot of countrymen and women, to accept some sort of fascist white savior, a dictator, as it were. Keep that in mind.
Whatever form of totalitarianism that works for them at the time and place. Communism, fascism, socialism, whatever. There are various forms of socialism. Fascism, a moderate form in the beginning, and it can be linked to corporatism, a form of socialism run by a coterie of businesses. Then there's socialism, the system that regulates and or controls all business and utilities. Nazism is the same as socialism, but usually includes racism and is more nationalistic in its application.
Stop it. Right here. Fascism and Nazism are one and the same. From Americans' point of view, there is and traditionally has been no separation between racists on the street and racists in office conducting public policies. So, I don't know what type of web this clown's trying to spin, but let's carry on.
Communism, which controls everything because no one really owns anything. The government.
Oh, now isn't that just like America? Think about it. You don't own your home. You barely really, I guess technically you own the clothes on your back, but that's about it. You don't own your car. Because if you do believe that you own your car, stop getting it registered. You believe that you own your home, stop paying your taxes. Hey, for that matter, if you believe that you own the shirt on your back, stop paying your personal income tax. And let's see what happens.
Government does. It's usually the more violent of all forms of socialism and has led to the death of hundreds of millions of people around the world. Keep in mind that the conspirators' numbers are small, and they have to fool the people into acceptance of the growth of government until it's too late for them to recover their liberty.
Before they can recover their liberty. You know how foolish that sounds? You know, as if they had liberty to begin with. Hold on. Great Depression. Yes, I believe it was. Hold on. Mean Things. I think it was Mean. There. Right here.
You've heard. Vote your values.
Hey, guys, I do want to let you all know it is highly important that you get out and vote. All right? Highly. Hold on. What is this?
Agricultural workers. With STFU members denied federal protection, the landlords continued their campaign of terror.
Intimidation. No, boys, you made your crop, you gathered it, and when it was all in, the boss told you how much cotton you made, and how much money you owed, and how much you got.
Hold on.
Corporate leaders were outraged by the Wagner Act and President Roosevelt. In Aliquippa, J&L defied the new law. The legal struggle would go all the way to the Supreme Court. Tom Girdler, now head of Republic Steel.
Oh no, here it is.
So over everything. And there was nothing that people could do, you know, unless they really wanted to take a chance of losing their jobs.
But as long as you followed their rules, which was keep your mouth shut, don't talk against J&L, don't join any unions, you're in good shape.
In 1933, Roosevelt's National Recovery Act recognized the right of industrial workers to form unions. Union leaders began a campaign for higher wages, an 8-hour workday, and job security.
Does that sound familiar, guys? 8-hour workday. Prior to this, they could work your ass as long as they fucking want it. Alright? Hold on.
But when organizers arrived in Aliquippa, J&L drove them out of town. In nearby Ambridge, 50 J&L guards joined a sheriff's posse.
Okay, I don't think this is the right one. Because one of these I was watching, and I actually learned from this documentary. They really went on about how the communists were basically helping black folks organize with the little workers unions for sharecropping, and you know, the industrial workers. But hold on, what's this?
The next day, evicted families defiantly met again, this time with the Reverend Howard Kester and union attorney Herman Goldberger.
It was jammed with men, women, and children. And I gathered 300 or 400, as I recall, people packed in that church.
Yeah, they...
The union. So in some cases, they helped us by...
Okay, hold on.
We know that the founder of fascism, Benito Mussolini, was a leader in the Italian Socialist Party connected to Lenin. He pulled out of that party and formed his black shirts as the means to take over Italy. Now, the black shirts and the fascist movement was largely based on the work that the Carbonari had done over the preceding decades that united the boot of Italy into a single country. You may recall the Carbonari was the second generation of the Illuminati. The propaganda and infiltration into Italian society by the Carbonari movement had set the stage for a future totalitarian government. Now, Mussolini is made to look as if he was an incompetent buffoon today. But he not only took over Italy, he set the tone for the future Nazi movement and the New Deal movement of Franklin Delano Roosevelt a decade later. Now, we don't have the time to get into it, but the formula was set by Mussolini. In Germany, it became more totalitarian than Italy, while in America, more lenient. But make no mistake about it, you can research this and just...
Do you hear what he called the United States America? Keep that in mind.
Discover just how much influence there was on the American government in the 1930s by Mussolini's fascism. This is covered more in depth in my forthcoming book on the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, the influence of fascism was more benign in America due to the education level of Americans, which made them harder to be subjugated under the socialist controls of the New Deal of Roosevelt. Outside of a detailed study of the roots of Nazism, no one can see the line from Illuminism to the Nazi movement. There are studies that claim a direct line into the occult Tula Society that started the Nazi Party, but the research is not substantial enough. One should look at the history of Bubov and Buonarroti in France and their offspring to see the roots of Nazism. The lineage from the Illuminati to Nazism is very detailed. For the sake of time, I will give you a general sense. We know that the two main goals of Illuminism, the elimination of God and the creation of a new world order, were certainly the goals of the Nazi movement.
Okay, let's talk about this real quick. A lot of these fools are so, okay, we're against the new world order. Blah, blah, blah. All right. After the rhetoric's all said and done, what are they ultimately suggesting? If we're not moving forward towards a equitable, just world, seriously for all, what are they basically telling us? In not so many words, that they want to keep things exactly the way that means, boy, you get and you shine shoes, woman, you get and you cook breakfast, and, you know, basically, white man, you know, is at top. Everyone else is in their little pecking order, and that's just going to be the way it goes. But that's not. The world is changing, where this old dude wants to recognize this, where the Alex Jones want to recognize it. And believe it or not, the world is truly waking up. Let's continue with this nonsense.
Movement. Hitler, for instance, said in his so-called Hitler's Second Book, found at the end of World War II, that he was a socialist. Hitler said the design for the Nazi swastika flag contained the red field to stand for the character of the movement. Red, the color of communism. We also know that a photograph exists of the
Okay, I'm not going to let that bullshit slide by. When we go back here, you see that little Nazi flag. The red stood for blood. The white dot stood for the white race. And the black emblem, well, in the Nazis' deal, is supposed to have been the swastika, but it's on a 45-degree angle. The sickle and hammer is pretty obvious, you know, on the Russian side or communist side, you know, work.
Commissars in charge of the Bavarian Soviet Republic in Munich in 1919. It shows Hitler in the photo. This photo is not refuted, rather it seems to be largely ignored. It was shortly after the communist attempt in Munich to establish the Soviet that Hitler was recruited by the Freikorps as an instructor and then as an infiltrator into a small fascist group where he became the leader. And it was renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party.
What did he just say? Hitler was basically an army spy sent in there to basically spy on these folks, but the fool becomes the leader and takes over the thing.
Or Nazis. Then large amounts of money started to pour into the movement. We know that certain British and American personalities did this later, after the movement got traction. But we do not know where the initial funding came from. We do know this. The Illuminati...
Stop it. They know, probably, let's look into, I don't know, Ford's bank account. Don't forget, Mr. Ford received the highest decoration a civilian could from the Nazis. And he had more than enough money. Don't forget, during the Great Depression, he was still making $33 billion, or $1 million, not billion, but $1 million a year. I think $35 million a year. All right? So he had more than enough money.
Started in Bavaria, where Munich is the primary city. From there, it fanned out into all of Germany. The German Union, set up by the Illuminati, effectively...
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. You know, if he was so conscious and really cared, how come we don't track down the financial records of the people who support the Nazi cause, all right? We bring them to light, and they get some sort of, you know, punishment. Because there's a lot of companies out there that have their hands in that, and it's all there. All that is paper traceable. Let's hear what this frog man has to say.
Prevented the German people from reading literature that promoted the principles of true liberty.
Yeah, it's called fake news. Fake news. Fake news.
Meanwhile, the Illuminati infiltrated the universities, the public schools, and certain governments of the German Confederation. Now, the leaders of the Illuminati, and its second and third generation leaders, and many of the illuminated professors in the universities, etc., were all racist to a certain extent.
Well, wow, to a certain extent. Let's just give this guy a round of... How can you be racist to just a certain extent? The extent was he doesn't want to admit this because he benefits from their said collective racism. And that's the reason why he's not truly talking about going and tracking down people who funded the Nazis. That's really why he's not even talking about true freedom for all Americans. And he says this, and he has this stupid ass look on his fucking face. Sorry, folks, I'm losing my cool.
Marx, Engels, Hegel, and on, they set the tone of future movements of racial hatred. While the Nazis thanked Americans for their model of eugenics, they also honored the Illuminati member Christoph Meiners as a founder of their racial theory, who wrote with another Illuminati member, Ludwig Timotheus Spittler, in Göttingen University History magazine. In other words, the Nazi racial theories came from the Illuminists. The German public schools adopted the...
So where did the American racist ideologies come from? These same said schools? You know, I mean... Jesus, dude. This dude lived during times they were lynching black folks in the South. This dude lived through times that women were fucking dying during the fucking 60s and shit, trying to get abortions. This dude has lived through all that bullshit and even seen with his fucking eyes. But he's still gonna come at us with this old whack-ass shit, trying to point the fingers at everyone else. Fuck.
Prussian design of education by the state, for the state, which we will visit in a future segment. As a result of tremendous illuminated influence, it was only a matter of time before the German people were educated into supporting some form of totalitarianism. The Nazi movement was what it became. The Nazis and the communists formed street armies, and they battled one another for control of the streets at rallies and events held by both entities. The Nazi units were known as the Brown Shirts, named after the color of their uniforms, which they'd originally received from the German government surplus. Once the Nazis won the battle for the streets, many of the communists simply joined the Brown Shirts, where they were quite comfortable, since there's very little difference between the two. They became known as beefsteak Nazis, brown on the outside and red on the inside. The roots of the roots of the Nazi movement, therefore, was as a result of decades of Illuminist infiltration and influence on the German society. Because of this and the Nazi and communist education the German people have sustained over the years, it is difficult to imagine that the German people will experience what we call liberty anytime soon. The problem is, they think they have it already. Next week, we'll begin to look at the influences that arose in France during the French Revolution that were imported into America through the Jacobin movement.
All right. Listen, guys, you know, if I cannot I got a new subscriber. Yeah. If I cannot stress this enough, hold on. I have to find so that you guys, so we all can be on the same page. Hold on.
I said, go ahead, as long as you do what you do.
It's horrible. You felt a deep anger. It was a frustrating anger.
Baltimore's black community marched in protest. Lynchings were becoming front-page news around the country as mob violence hit 6 states over the next 2 months. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People led anti-lynching groups from both North and South to urge President Roosevelt to take a public stand. In a radio address on December 6th, the president called lynching a vile form of collective murder. We do not excuse, he said, those in high places or low who condone it. Ending lynching in America became the #1 priority for Walter White, the NAACP's executive secretary. A light-skinned black man, White had spent 9 years as
a light-skinned black man? I don't know, guys. I mean, dude, he got this little Hitler-ass mustache, lips as thin as fuck, and the same thing you're gonna find when you look at the all of these fucking so-called black organizations, the black churches. Guy looks like this. Even the Muslim church, you know, guy's kind of light. So, you know, yeah, not one nap in his fucking hair. Eyes are brown, probably. I can't really tell on this, whatever. But this, yeah, that's a black guy. Sure. But light-skinned black guy. I mean, what the fuck? Big-ass ears, pointy little nose, thin-ass lips, straight-ass hair, white-ass skin. Yeah, light-skinned black guy.
As an NAACP field investigator.
His assignment was to become a witness to lynchings.
Now, that's a black guy. You know, even kind of got a little Hitler, but look at that nose. Look at that nose. That beautiful nose. Small ears. Now, let's, seriously, I'm sorry, I can't let that bullshit fly.
A light-skinned black man, White had spent 9 years as an...
Now, let's look at this guy. This guy, I wish I could put him up.
NAACP led Walter
Whatever.
White.
I think you guys get the overall point.
Carnera measured 6 feet 6, wore size 22 shoes, and was a favorite of Italy's fascist dictator, Benito Mussolini.
And here's the Italian out at Hot Springs, Arkansas, feeling as fit as the well-known fiddle and ready to go against the 21-year-old Black Shadow Joe Louis, whom he meets in the Yankee Stadium on June 25th.
But no promoter could have dreamed up the world events that gave the matchup its dramatic twist. In the spring of 1935, as the fight approached, Mussolini's Italian army threatened to invade Ethiopia, one of the 2 uncolonized nations in Africa.
Now, that's a very good point. One of the 2. I know this went kind of from John Birch to Great Depression, but trust me, guys, it's all basically in there.
In far-off Addis Ababa, Emperor Haile Selassie, looking over his snappy and quite modern fighting men, makes it plain that he means to be ready.
It was a source of considerable pride to black.
Okay. Let's get to the fight. Joe beats
Then went
his
out to
ass.
Yankee Stadium and beat #1 contender Max Baer.
All right.
28 lynchings were reported, more than 3 times the number of the year before. No one knows how many went unreported.
Ain't that the fucking truth? All right, let me go to not the Arsenal. I really want to get that one, man. I'll take time out and I will actually find it where they break it down on one of these deals about Hold on. Let me just try this one real quick.
Dear America,
you are missing out on a lot. CRTV is on fire. Literally, we're on fire.
They're missing out on some crazy stuff. Some crazy stuff!
No.
He made listeners feel
of recovery. A spectacular parade up New York's Fifth Avenue to promote an unprecedented federal effort, the National Recovery Administration. Roosevelt called the NRA a partnership in planning between government and industry. Its goal?
It's funny, the NRA now is the National Rifle Association.
To speed recovery by establishing profit levels for business and wage levels for labor. In a show of national solidarity, more than 2 million employers across the country promised to abide by the NRA codes.
The NRA means to me a steady job with more pay. The extra kind comes in handy.
Okay. Well, anyhow, guys, you know, the John Birch Society, are they evil? Okay, I don't know really how, I hate using terms like good and evil, but they're basically self-serving. Okay, a lot of information that you're getting from Alex Jones is directly coming from these folks. You know, hold on, here we go. The Illuminati's go.
All revolutionary movements after its founding. Contemporary authorities like Abbe Barwell, John Robeson, later Leon Trotsky, Winston Churchill, and even the state of California. This week we're going to...
And even the state of wow. Is that his attempt to be humorous? Ha 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 ha. California, I get it. Land of fruits and nuts. Ha ha ha.
Discuss their overall goals. Now, we've stated that their primary goals are a one world government to be ruled by them, and the elimination,
as opposed to the one world government that to be ruled by you.
Nation of God from public life. As part of this overall plan, they have the destruction of Christianity, the destruction of nations in favor of internationalism, the encouragement, or the discouragement rather, of patriotism with the substitute for a cry for universal brotherhood, the abolition of family ties and marriage by means of a systematic corruption, suppression of the rights of inheritance and property, and last, the state control of children.
Okay, let's break this down. Going backwards, states control of children. We already have that now. It's called mandatory education. All right. Suppression of rights of inheritance and property. Okay. Now, if your inheritance basically consists of lands that was either, you know, took in or swindled from native people, is that a just inheritance? Right there. Okay, abolish of family ties and marriage by means of systematic corruption. MGTOW or whatever. Men going their own way. That's a prime example of that. All right. Discouraging of patriotism and substitution for cry for universal brotherhood. Honestly, that's just a need for the end of warfare. People are tired of sending their sons and daughters to 6 feet holes for no apparent reason other than Halliburton's get a check. Okay. Destruction of nations in favor of international, which is basically a repeat of the other one, and the destruction of Christianity. If religion is truly real, and the God that the religion is reported to serve is truly real, you cannot destroy said religion. It's impossible, because it would have the blessing of God. So I don't understand why that will even be on this little list when we're dealing with governments. All right.
They did not reveal their goals to the general public, but kept it secret, not only of their society, but of its real goals.
I mean, same goals as you.
There have been several books written early on which obfuscated the goals of the Illuminati and tried to apologize for Weishaupt that he was being misunderstood. Now, anyone who tried to expose them was to be smeared and ridiculed as mad. And this has happened to anyone who's ever tried to bring out the fact of the Illuminati. And we can talk about that a little bit later when it is involved with the United States.
Look, the reason why we know that you're bringing this out, there's nothing like a mystical boogeyman to be able to point the finger and get this person out, get this person out, take this person out, so on and so on. Because honestly, what I'm hearing and what I understand of this organization, his talking points are more or less projection.
Or early America, even before the United States was formed. The overall strategy concerning the existence of the Illuminati was delineated by Weishaupt. He said this, quote, "Control the very fact of our existence. If they discover us, conceal our real objective by profession of benevolence. If our real objective is perceived, pretend to disband and relinquish the whole thing, but assume another name and put forth new agents." And that is what they have done over the years.
And that's what we need to do as well. If we're going to change this world for the better, we're going to have to subvert all these institutions. We're going to have to send in infiltrators. We're going to have to take them over from within, using that and basically propagandizing the masses, change their voting patterns. We can do this thing in a couple generations, guys. All right. This has been Special Report, and stay tuned for John Birch Society Part 3.